How do you handle chargebacks across Stripe, Adyen, Checkout.com, and Worldpay without building a separate integration for each one? Stripe fires charge dispute created with needs response. Adyen fires notification of chargeback. Checkout.com fires dispute received. Worldpay delivers a batch report with no webhook at all. Hyperswitch normalizes all of this through 3 layers: status normalization, channel normalization, and workflow normalization. Let's go through each one. How does Hyperswitch unify dispute states across Stripe, Adyen, and Worldpay? That's status normalization. Every processor has its own vocabulary for the same dispute event. Hyperswitch maps all of them into 7 canonical statuses, which is the dispute status object. Let's look at the state machine. A new chargeback comes in. That's dispute created in the state machine. From there, it branches. If the issuer withdraws the chargeback before a ruling, that's dispute canceled. If you submit evidence, it moves to dispute challenged. From there, if the issuer rules in your favor, that's dispute won. And if the issuer rules against you, that's dispute lost. If you decide to concede, that's dispute accepted. And if the response deadline passes with no action, that's dispute expired. Now let's look at the mapping table. Take dispute opened as an example. When a new chargeback comes in, Stripe sends charge dispute created with needs response. Adyen sends notification of chargeback. And Worldpay delivers receive network transaction from a batch report. These are 3 completely different signals, and Hyperswitch maps all 3 to one status: dispute opened. And what about dispute expired? Each processor has a different way of expressing the deadline. Stripe puts it in the response deadline of the dispute webhook. Adyen uses the defense window, and Worldpay provides it as reply by day in the chargeback API. Hyperswitch takes all 3 of those and maps them into one single field, which is challenge required by. Now let's talk about the second layer, channel normalization. Even if you know what a dispute status means, you still need to receive it. And processors deliver dispute events in completely different ways. Let's look at the table. 3 categories emerge. Stripe, Adyen, Checkout.com, and PayPal support real-time webhooks and APIs. That's the easiest to integrate. Worldpay and Revolut Business only expose a list API, so there are no real-time webhooks. Hyperswitch handles this by running a scheduled polling loop against the report API and converting each row into the same normalized event stream. For dashboard-only processors like CyberSource, Bank of America, AIBMS, and Authipay, channel normalization is not feasible. There are no webhooks or APIs. Hyperswitch surfaces the dispute status in the same vocabulary, but the action falls back to the processor's own portal. Now look at the diagram. You can see Hyperswitch sits in the middle. There are inbound webhooks from Stripe, Adyen, PayPal, scheduled polling from Worldpay and Revolut Business, and they're all flowing through the Hyperswitch dispute normalization layer. The merchant gets one unified surface, unified webhook events, unified dispute list APIs, and unified dashboard view. And the third layer we're going to talk about, which is the last one, is workflow normalization. Once you receive a dispute, you need to act on it. A complete dispute workflow needs 4 operations: retrieve, accept, upload evidence, and submit defense. Let's look at the operations table. Each processor handles evidence submission completely differently. With Stripe, you upload the file through their File Upload API for dispute evidence, and then submit the defense by hitting the v1 disputes endpoint with the dispute ID and submit set to true. Adyen takes a different approach. You call supplyDefenseDocument to upload, then defendDispute to submit. But you also need a defenseReasonCode, which you have to fetch from retrieveApplicableDefenseReasons first. For Checkout.com, evidence uploads directly to the dispute case. You'll see this in the demo shortly. And with Worldpay, you upload the attachment to the Vantiv chargeback case, then trigger a represent action. That's 4 completely different API workflows for the same operation. Now let's look at the programmability table. This shows you which workflow actions are actually exposed through APIs. Stripe and Adyen both fully expose evidence submission. Worldpay is only partial. You end up going through a portal for some of it. And then there are smaller capabilities that aren't consistent across processors. Take scheme-specific defense reason lookup. Only Adyen exposes that. So even when an API exists, the surface isn't consistent. Hyperswitch normalizes all of this with one endpoint, disputes evidence, and it routes to the correct processor-specific workflow automatically. How does Hyperswitch normalize a checkout.com chargeback into the same format as Stripe and Adyen? Here it is live. I created a test payment through Hyperswitch, routed through checkout.com. Checkout.com raised the chargeback automatically. Here it is in the dispute section, dispute opened. Let's click into it. The connector is checkout. The connector status is dispute evidence required. That's checkout.com's raw value. Hyperswitch maps it to dispute opened. The connector reason code is 10.4. That's Visa's fraud reason code. The connector required by is June 21st. That's your challenge required by deadline, derived automatically from checkout.com's response window. Now let's scroll down to events and logs and go under event data. The webhook payload shows dispute status as dispute opened, the same canonical status you'd get from Stripe's charge dispute created with needs response, or Adyen's notification of chargeback. Checkout.com's raw vocabulary stays in the connector status field. Your handler only ever sees dispute opened. So that's what the dispute looks like in the dashboard. Now that we've gone through the dispute fields and statuses, let's counter this dispute in Hyperswitch. You get all the evidence type fields: receipt, customer communication, shipping documentation, and more. But which one you need depends on the connector reason code. This dispute is 10.4, Visa's card absent fraud code, so we upload shipping documentation to show the goods were delivered. Behind the scenes, Hyperswitch routes this to the right processor endpoint. Stripe gets a file upload with the purpose dispute evidence, then a call to the V1 disputes endpoint. Adyen gets supplyDefenseDocument, then defendDispute with the defenseReasonCode. Checkout.com gets the evidence uploaded straight to the dispute case. Worldpay gets an attachment on the chargeback case. You do the same thing every time, and Hyperswitch figures out where it needs to go. So, to bring it all together, Stripe, Adyen, Checkout.com, and Worldpay all speak different languages when it comes to disputes. Different webhook events, different status names, different evidence submission APIs, different deadline fields. Hyperswitch normalizes all four into 7 canonical statuses, 1 consistent payload shape, and 2 API calls to submit evidence. The challenge required by field gives you the SLA deadline regardless of source: Stripe's response window, Adyen's defense window, Checkout.com's deadline, or Worldpay's reply by date. Add Braintree, CyberSource, or any new processor. The same 7 cases handle it. Thanks for watching. The full docs are linked down below. If this was useful, like and subscribe for more.